Can you hear me like that? Whoa. Yeah. Okay. Good morning, everyone. First, I want to thank the organizers again for inviting me today. It's wonderful to be here, and also express my gratitude to be here on unceded Musqueam territory. So I teach at Simon Fraser University at the School of Interactive Arts and Technology in Surrey. And today I'm going to talk about a couple of projects that I've been very fortunate to work on over the last decade or so. Both of the projects that I'm going to talk about were funded by the Virtual Museum of Canada, which is an initiative of the Department of Canadian Heritage to fund access to collections, museum collections in Canada online. But the two things I'm going to talk about that these projects that I've worked on have helped me and my collaborators to understand better is this notion of ownership and control and some of those issues that come up in the course of producing virtual exhibits like these. I'm going to talk about two projects. The first is a project that was produced with the Doig River First Nation called Danewajich, Daneza Stories and Song, back in 2007. And Amber Riddington is a co-curator and co-producer of that project. She's here, which is wonderful. I'm going to talk about ongoing work later. So Amber, if there's anything you want to jump in and say, please go ahead. And also a project that will be released in the fall that's produced with Dave and the Scowlitz Indian Band and the Stolo Research and Resource Management Center called Scowlitz, a Stolo Coast Salish community in the Fraser River Valley. So it was about 10 years ago that Amber and I went up to the Doig River First Nation with an archive that had recently been digitized by Robin Riddington and Jillian Riddington, including a great deal of very valuable photographs, audio recordings, film recordings that they had recorded with Daneza communities over the last 40 years or so. And they, given the new tools available and their desire to return this material to the community in an accessible form, they created this archive. Amber and I were working with the community to develop and design a Virtual Museum of Canada exhibit. We didn't know what it would be about, but we did know that we wanted to find a way to create access to that archive and start to use it for a lot of the projects and goals that the band had at that time. Now in this picture, we're sitting in the Doig River Band Hall. At the very beginning of the production process of this exhibit, the chief at that time, Gary Oker, had brought a Daneza Dreamer's drum from his house and had opened it up in the meeting as a way to facilitate conversation about what he thought that this exhibit might be about. And in this photograph here, I'm filming Tommy Atachi, who's talking about the drum in Daneza Zage, and he's telling the story of who made that drum, how it came to be created, where that drum had, where the dream that related to the image on that drum had been received by a dreamer named Gaïen who had died a century before. After those initial meetings, we traveled, Amber and I, with a team of youth and elder filmmakers out to places in Daneza territory where people recorded stories about dreamers in Daneza Zage. Here you can see Robin Riddington and Chief Jerry Atachi, Mayup Sasson, and some of the youth participants out looking for some important places for the project. And we ended up recording these narratives in 7 different places in Daneza territory. Now, over about 2 subsequent years of virtual exhibit production where Amber and I were traveling back and forth between Vancouver and Doig River to work on aspects of the site and bring it back for review and discussion, some really important questions started to come up as we got close to sort of the final version of the website. This is an image of workspace in the Doig River Band Hall where we were working through content for the exhibit. All of that material eventually became this project, Danewajich, Daneza Stories and Song, Dreamers in the Land. But In the course of doing this work, people started to talk about the fact that images of Dreamers drums, including the ones that were in the archive, were not suitable to be shared online. They weren't suitable to be shared publicly. Now, it was described how they were sacred and had always been managed under restricted conditions of access and viewing. So what I want to just highlight here is that we learned through this collaborative process of producing this exhibit that there was a very strong desire to control the circulation of the products of research that were in the archive, and also other kinds of heritage in digital form. And we also learned that this collaborative process of producing media opened up a really important space where people could articulate their local cultural property rights and how they thought that material should be safely and respectfully circulated. And I think Amber will agree, if this hadn't been a longer process of review and discussion, maybe those rights wouldn't have been articulated in that way. Again, though, even though those claims could be made and decisions could be made about how the material circulated, we kind of came up against this ethical paradox where, while the process that we were engaged in opened up a space to talk about what should be shared and what shouldn't, it actually pointed to the fact that it can be pretty hard to enforce those rights. So even though there are images that people at that time didn't want to share, they were actually still available online, and it's hard to take back things that have been digitized and shared already. In the context of our project and also prior projects and publications and research. So now let's jump ahead to now and another Virtual Museum of Canada project that's being produced by the SRRMC. And Dave, please jump in too if you want to say anything. What I'm going to sort of say about this one is here we have similar questions and similar kinds of concerns about respectful circulation of cultural heritage, respectful circulation of information about the community, and how can that be done in a way that's respectful of rights and demonstrates ownership and control of this material. So this project is just in the final stages of production, a collaboration between the Scowlitz First Nation and the SRRMC. Is that okay if I abbreviate it like that? And then a really big team of archaeologists, anthropologists, media producers, and designers. And this project uses the Reciprocal Research Network as a central repository for bringing together the products of archaeological work in the Scowlitz community through field schools and other collaborative work over the last couple of decades. And so the site is intended to be a community biography and a representation of culture, language, and history here. And also a document of about 20 years of collaborative community-based archaeological work, which included the excavation of burial mounds and reburialed ancestors, building on what Dave has just been talking about in his presentation. In the course of doing this work, important cultural protocols were developed to make sure that people were protected in doing the work that they were doing, to make people visible to the spirits on the site. And this guided the way work has been done, and it's also been part of the way this virtual exhibit has been framed and the collaborative process has unfolded. Now the belongings that came from the Scowlitz site or the Keithiel site obviously have a very real connection to the way people live today. So there's a very important sense of continuity that's developed and revealed in the process of making this material public. And of course the tools have changed, but what people are doing in many ways is the same. Here's Sonny Williams is cutting a salmon at his house, doing work that that of course is in continuity with what people are seeing in the Keithiel site. Now, Dave talked about Squelquel, and I just want to bring this back as one of the organizing principles for this virtual museum project. Belongings that this exhibit shows are also part of Stolo Squelquel, and on the site it's described as true news. It refers to the oral history of our ancestors and the places they fished, hunted, harvested, and spent time in our world. Once we know our Squelquel, we have a responsibility to use the places our ancestors used. Once we use these places, it becomes our responsibility to take care of them. Taking care of the places in our Squelquel means protecting them so they can provide for our future generations. So this project has been in large part about building connections between elders and youth in order to share Squelquel, but also to find a way, building on presentation, to share this as an outreach tool with the public, to share these stories with the community and to draw attention to this history and what it means for all of us in our colonial relationship. So the principle of Squelquel has been very important for the team in considering how documentation and photographs and material produced for this exhibit can be shared publicly. And one of the things that we have worked on is integrating traditional knowledge labels. Has this come up yet in the conference? So the Sustainable Heritage Network that I know is here, and the work of Kim Christian and Jane Anderson with localcontext.org has been to develop labels that are kind of like Creative Commons licenses that can be attached to media that indicate that this information needs to be considered differently from other kinds of information, that traditional knowledge has different attributes that need to be considered, and this is an opportunity to share this information and to instruct and inform the public about how this information should be shared. So building on our process, the community advisors and the group who's working on this project translated into Halkomelem certain types of labels that help people better understand how this information should be shared and used. So attribution, for example, refers to who produced the knowledge. In our Halkomelem language, we call this, I can't pronounce it very well, but Squix Kas Te Tamech, name and place. Scowlitz is a tribe of Stolo, the holders and caretakers of the knowledge, who look after what belongs to them. Similarly, Siwes, which means outreach, specifies that this knowledge is shared to educate other Stolo and non-Stolo about the teachings of this community. We call this Siwes, education or teachings. So these are a couple of the labels that are applied to the entire website as a way to indicate people's very deliberate sense of outreach, but also control and ownership of the material. And then there are other labels that Dave actually alluded to in his presentation. Haha, meaning that something is sacred or secret. So material that is not revealed but can be shown to be present and cared for respectfully is a part of this as well. So I won't go on much longer, but just to say that for both projects, I think these core concerns are still really, really central. This notion of controlling the products of research in your community. How can you share them in a way that integrates and communicates a local sense of what is ethical and proper for sharing? How can you have control of circulation of cultural heritage in digital form in a time when it's very easy to share and remix and circulate without that kind of control? And also in this project, that a longer process of collaborative production that involves very core community participation from the early point of writing grants and deciding what the project should be about and deciding how the process will unfold has been really important for creating a space in which these rights and cultural rights can become a really central part of the project. And I think the traditional knowledge labels are an example of a new tool that has come out of a lot of projects all over the world, and a lot of communities who are also struggling to determine how best to represent their cultural heritage online while sharing it and also respecting what it means. So thank you very much. I will end it there. Yeah, thank you.